So many of my favorite memories happened in the dark. Chasing fireflies in the summer, bounding out of the house to spot the 3 stars that would mark the end of Shabbat, driving around aimlessly with friends in high school, wondering where the road and the night might take us. But my favorite memory of all comes in the raucous midst of bar mitzvah preparation. Vayetze was my Abba's bar mitzvah parsha, and it was also my brother's. Kobe was 12 or so, and I was 17. And this was the first time I was hearing trope being studied out loud. Hearing the trope of Parshat Vayetze made me feel that one day I could learn to read Torah too. So in the evenings, Kobe and my Abba would sit at the dining room table, listening to tapes and reviewing the trope marks, while I sat on the stairs just out of sight, singing along. Off in another room, I was also learning to lane Vayetze. But my singing and my intruding in on Kobe's preparations were understandably irritating and disruptive. So my Ima would emerge from another room, take my hand, and lead me outside, where we would sit in the rocking chairs until Kobe finished his lesson. This was our time. Every night for nearly a year, my mom and I would leave through the front door and sit, rock our way through those hours on the front porch. Sometimes we would argue, sometimes we would sit in silence, but most of the time, those hours passed quickly with laughter, jokes, and stories. The darkness gave us something we couldn't replicate in any other place or time. Under the cover of the moon and the stars, we could just be. Jacob is the first of the Avot, the first of the patriarchs to contend with darkness. Vayetze Yaakov mi Be'er Sheva vayelech Charana vayifga b'makom vayalan sham kiva hashemesh vayikach me'avnei hamakom vayase me'rashotav vayishkav b'makom hahu. Jacob left Be'er Sheva and set out for Haran. He came upon a certain place, stopped there for the night, for the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of that place, he put it under his head, and he lay down in that place. In the very opening verses of Parshat Vayetze, we see Jacob contending with 2 kinds of darkness. The first, the metaphoric darkness of leaving his parents' home in Be'er Sheva, of separating from his family. And the second, the more literal darkness that comes in the nighttime. The word makom, place, is used 3 times in our verses. 3 times we are reminded that Jacob has come to this temporary place, this place of transition and rest. The land on which Jacob sleeps has traditionally been identified with Mount Moriah, the site of the Akedah, where Jacob's father Isaac was bound up and nearly sacrificed by his father Abraham. Mount Moriah is also the future site of the temple. Aviva Zornberg describes this place as one of prayer and sacrifice, of the human attempt to come close to God. It is a place of purity and danger, of great longing and distancing. The Midrash in Genesis Rabbah tells us that when Jacob arrived in this place, between Be'er Sheva and Haran, when the night fell, that he tried to pass through, but the world became entirely like a wall in front of him. The darkness thick, palpable, unbreakable. But the word makom is also a name for God. For God is the place of the universe. We are told 3 separate times that God is here in this moment with Jacob, even in this dark and momentary place. In the opening verses of Vayetze, not only are we introduced to the physical, geographic location where Jacob lays down to sleep for the night, we are reminded perhaps even reassured that God is there too. The Midrash comments on our scene, explaining that God caused the sun to sink earlier than usual in order to speak with Jacob privately. This, the Midrash tells us, can be likened to a king who has the lights extinguished so that he may speak with his friend in private. There is something so intimate about this change in the natural order of things. God makes the sun go down earlier than usual, bringing the darkness perhaps a moment too soon to be closer to Jacob, to communicate with Jacob. Under the cover of night, God can be fully present. And in the darkness, we know that God does communicate with Jacob. After Jacob falls asleep, he dreams. In the foreground, that famous ladder planted in the earth, its top buried in the heavens, the ministering angels climbing up and down. And in this dream, God stands beside Jacob and makes a covenant. I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. The ground on which you are lying I will assign to you and to your offspring. Your descendants shall be as the dust of the earth. You shall spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. All the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you and by your descendants. Remember, I am with you. I will protect you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Remember, I am with you. In the darkness, God makes a promise to Jacob, a promise of comfort, progeny, power, and protection. But Jacob's experience of this darkness and his reaction to it matter. What happens in this darkness is crucial. A covenant is made, and a prayer is born. The creation of the evening service of Tfilat Arvit is attributed to Jacob. Just like his father and grandfather before him, Jacob uses prayer to mark time. There is a hint of this in the Midrashic translation of the verb vayifga, and he prayed or he pleaded. Through the darkness, God extends an invitation with a covenant. Jacob accepts that invitation with his prayer. The Midrash continues, at evening, a person should say, "May it be thy will, O Lord my God, that you bring me out of darkness into light." Jacob is the first person to pray in the dark, to make holy that which is otherwise terrifying, paralyzing, and unknown, to lean into the darkness, embrace it, and follow God's lead in transforming it into something new. In his unique experience, Jacob serves as a model for dealing with the variations of darkness in our own lives. And right now, in this moment of fear and uncertainty, we are all feeling those same ebbs and flows. We are scared, but perhaps maybe we are hopeful. Things feel so unfamiliar right now, but maybe, just maybe, our eyes will adjust. When my mom, Ellen, died almost 2 years ago, Kobe, my Abba, and I were suddenly dropped into the untouchable void of grief. At first, the sorrow and the pain so acute, my grief actually felt like a well or a pit with smooth walls. We were all trapped at the bottom, unable to climb or claw our way out. And there were days, countless days, that no matter how hard we looked and no matter how many stones we overturned, we were still stuck, alone, bereft in the bottom of that well. But for all the sweetness that the darkness had previously given to my life, this was different. I felt suspended, like an atom, between the emotional and tangible shades of grief, unable to walk around the wall, unable to climb over it. But then there were days when, even from the very bottom of that pit, if we dared to look up, we could see just the smallest sliver of light. My grief has shifted and changed a lot in the last 2 years. Often, it feels that my grief has a personality, a mind of its own. I have moved through the denial, the anger, the bargaining, the depression, and the acceptance. And on most days, I feel like I am carrying it all. Grief is not linear. It is perhaps the most fundamental, messy, and chaotic of human experiences. It comes in waves, sometimes all at once, and sometimes not at all. But my grief has also given me many gifts. Of this, I am certain. In my grief, I have connected with my Ima in new ways that were unavailable to us before. I have been able to access her in her fullness, in her totality, in everything that she was. The joy, the hope, the laughter, but also the sorrow, the sadness, and the loss. It feels that in its own strange way, we can be fully present with one another. On this side, we can just be. I think a lot about those nights I spent with my Ima on the front porch, Kobe and my Abba inside studying Parshat Vayetze, the gift and the blessing that it was to sit in the safety of the nighttime, seeing each other in ways not spoiled by the bright light of day. Grief has taught me what is possible in the darkness, that we can be transformed because of the darkness. And as I have worked hard to move through my grief, I have found that the darkness feels safe again. Just like when we were kids, I feel that the darkness holds something creative, something intimate, and something mysterious. In that dingy and unlit pit of grief, it can be impossible to trust that God is there. It feels like no covenant and no prayer are possible. But Jacob's experience in that liminal place between Beersheba and Haran gives us a way forward. Jacob teaches us how to reveal God even in the darkest of moments. And as he stands before that great midrashic wall created by the night, Jacob makes a choice. He chooses to pray. He chooses to reach out. He chooses to trust that there is life and godliness after the grief. Remember, I am with you.